Have you ever silenced a scream inside your soul just to be liked? Have you ever stayed in a room where your very presence was slowly dissolving, simply because walking away would mean facing the terror of your own emptiness? How many times? Have you accepted the unbearable, not because you didn't know it was wrong, but because somewhere someone taught you to swallow pain in the name of love, loyalty, or belonging? These are not random occurrences. They are patterns, ancient, ancestral, unconscious, and they are feeding something darker than you think. You see, the psyche is not a blank canvas. It is a battlefield filled with invisible contracts, unspeakable betrayals and archetypes that pull your strings without your awareness. What you tolerate on the outside mirrors what you have suppressed on the inside. And every time you allow what is unacceptable to remain, you are not being compassionate. You are being complicit in your own undoing. But here's the part. No one dares to tell you, the real danger is not in what others do to you. The real danger is in how quietly you let them. Carl Jung did not speak of tolerance as a virtue when it comes to the soul's integrity. He warned us, repeatedly, that what you fail to confront becomes your master. And the most insidious behaviors are not always violent, loud, or obvious. Some wear a smile, some sound like kindness, some call themselves love. But underneath, they erode your identity, devour your boundaries, and cripple the self that was meant to awaken. Do you recognize these behaviors? Are you sure? What if I told you that your shadow is the one opening the door to these patterns? That by being understanding, you've actually become unconscious? That the mask of empathy you wear is sometimes the very reason you are still shackled? This is not about judgment. This is about awakening. And the longer you look away, the more deeply entangled you become in the very web that is draining your power. But now, for the first time, someone is holding up a mirror, not to accuse you, but to reveal you. There are 8 behaviors that no soul should tolerate, not once, not ever, not because you are weak, but because you are sacred, because to accept them is to abandon the self. And to abandon the self is to lose the battle before it even begins. But I won't tell you what they are, not yet, because to name them too soon would be to rob you of the transformation they demand. No, you must feel them before you can see them. And by the time this journey ends, you will. But only if you stay. Only if you dare to remember what you once promised never to forget. They will smile as they cross your boundaries, and you will thank them for it. Not because you are blind, but because you were trained, slowly, subtly, to associate the erosion of your limits with love. Do you see it now? That moment when someone dismissed your no, ignored your silence, minimized your discomfort, and you swallowed it. You reasoned with yourself. You softened the edges. You said they didn't mean it. But something inside you recoiled, something ancient, something that knew this wasn't just about that moment. It was about the pattern. The first behavior you must never tolerate is the silent annihilation of yourself through the mask of affection. When your sacred line is crossed and you remain still, that is not peace. That is the death of instinct. And Jung knew, when instinct dies, the shadow grows stronger. But how do we end up here? We are not born with blurred boundaries. We are born screaming, fists clenched, claiming space. It is only after years of conditioning, of being told that our discomfort is inconvenient, our pain exaggerated, our truth dangerous, that we begin to shrink. We make ourselves smaller in exchange for inclusion. We allow the unacceptable in exchange for not being alone. But the price is steep. Every tolerated violation writes a new sentence in the script of self-betrayal. And this script runs deep. It whispers, if I just stay quiet, they'll stay close. If I don't make it a big deal, I won't be abandoned. But here's the truth that burns. If they only stay when you silence yourself, you were abandoned from the beginning. Not by them. Zayu, and that abandonment doesn't scream. It echoes in small moments. The way you flinch when someone raises their voice. The way you freeze when someone touches you without asking. The way you laugh at a joke that hurts you just to avoid the weight of confrontation. These are not quirks. These are scars. Scars left by the moments you convinced yourself that tolerance was strength, that letting it slide was the mature thing to do. But Jung would ask, mature for whom? Whose voice are you preserving when yours is swallowed? Whose comfort are you prioritizing when your inner world trembles with unease? What you call maturity may be nothing more than trauma with a halo. There is a particular violence in being unseen and calling it love. When someone invalidates your reality, mocks your dreams, dismisses your pain, and you stay, not because you don't feel it, but because you no longer trust your perception. That is the second behavior you must never accept. The denial of your truth. Not because your truth is absolute, but because when you hand over the authority of your inner world to someone else, you have stepped out of your own psyche. And that space does not remain empty. The shadow steps in. It whispers that your needs are too much, your sensitivity a flaw, your anger a threat. It tells you to wear a smile while your insides bleed. And the world, drunk on performance and plastic harmony, will reward that smile. Until one day, you no longer recognize the face behind it. The shadow does not arrive with fangs and fire. It arrives in silence, in the hesitation to speak, in the habit of apologizing for existing. It slips in every time you let someone rewrite your emotions in their language. You're overreacting. It was just a joke. You're so sensitive. These phrases may seem harmless, but they are surgical strikes to the core of your self-trust. Jung warned, what you deny about yourself does not disappear, it waits. And when enough of your reality has been denied, you begin to dissociate from yourself. You stop knowing what you want, what you feel, what you believe. You become a ghost in your own life, drifting between the needs of others and the silence of your own soul. And the worst part? You perform it well, you perform it beautifully. And so we return to the beginning. The smile, the soft voice, the quiet tolerance. These are not signs of virtue. They are signs of an ego trained to survive, at the cost of authenticity. But survival is not the same as living. And Jung's work was never about comfort. It was about confrontation. He did not teach us to be nice. He taught us to be whole. And wholeness demands that we reclaim every part of ourselves we gave away in the name of keeping the peace. So, ask yourself now, what have you been tolerating that is actually intolerable? What part of you is screaming beneath the smile? And if that part could speak, what would it say? They will call it tough love. They will dress their cruelty in robes of honesty, tell you that their coldness is just clarity, that their detachment is strength. And you, yearning for guidance, will swallow their sharp words like medicine. But what if the medicine is poison in disguise? What if the wound they claim to heal is the very one they keep reopening, again and again, because they know you won't walk away? The third behavior you must never tolerate is emotional cruelty dressed as righteousness. Because beneath the surface of their superiority lies not wisdom but projection, a desperate refusal to face their own fractured reflection. Jung saw this clearly. What we judge harshly in others is often what we have exiled within ourselves. You will find them in positions of authority, in your family, your friendships, your love life. They are the ones who never apologize, the ones who make you feel stupid for crying, the ones who speak in ultimatums. They mistake control for respect, silence for loyalty. And you, if wounded enough, will begin to confuse that control with safety. You'll say they just want what's best for me, but no. What they want is power without intimacy. They want obedience without vulnerability. And you want to be seen, so you tolerate it. You tolerate their harsh tone, their gaslighting apologies, their tendency to cut you down in front of others and call it just being honest. But honesty without compassion is brutality. And if their truth requires the death of your spirit, then it was never truth, only shadow in disguise. The fourth behavior, even more insidious, is manipulation that parades as love. It does not roar, it whispers. It doesn't push, it pulls gently, sweetly, until you forget which voice is yours and which voice is theirs. They will say, I only do this because I care. And you will believe them because part of you needs it to be true. You will let them decide what is best for you. You will change your plans, your clothes, your tone. You will shrink yourself just enough to keep their approval alive. But in doing so, you will abandon something holy. Jung wrote that the soul cannot bear betrayal from within. It will scream in symptoms, anxiety, depression, numbness. Not because something is wrong with you, but because something is missing, yourself, the one you left behind when you chose peace over truth. They may never lay a hand on you, but they will twist reality around you like smoke. You'll doubt your memories, your instincts, your boundaries. You'll stay in conversations that feel like mazes. You'll apologize for things you didn't do, defend yourself against accusations that make no sense. And every time you try to leave, they'll pull you backward with tears, with promises, with guilt. This is not love. This is enmeshment. This is a hunger that eats your identity and calls it closeness. Jung warned us, the most dangerous things are not the monsters in the dark, but the ones hiding behind light. The more innocent the mask, the more vicious the control. And if you are not careful, you will protect your captor more fiercely than you ever protected yourself. And perhaps the most terrifying behavior of all, the fifth one, is indifference. Cold, dismissive, apathetic indifference. Not the kind that screams, but the kind that yawns while you cry. That forgets your birthday. That leaves your message on read. That makes you feel invisible in the very place you are supposed to feel most held. And yet, you stay. You stay because you believe you're asking for too much. Because somewhere, in your story, you learn that presence must be earned, that attention is conditional, that love is a prize for perfect behavior. But Jung would tell you, love is not something you perform for. It is something you remember within. And anyone who demands your silence as a condition for staying was never holding your heart, only your fear. These behaviors are not always grand or grotesque. They are subtle. They happen in whispers, in sighs, in glances. And that's what makes them so dangerous. They slip past your defenses because they look familiar. They echo your past. And if you don't wake up, you will call them fate. But they are not fate, and they are patterns, and patterns can be broken, but only if you stop tolerating what you were taught to accept. Jung did not ask us to fix others. He asked us to face ourselves, to reclaim what was lost, to remember the voice inside that once said, enough. Not with rage, not with revenge, but with the quiet, immovable force of someone who has remembered their worth. There comes a moment when the weight is no longer on what they did, but on how long you let it continue. It is a quiet grief, not loud like betrayal, but hollow like regret. It settles in the spaces you used to fill with hope. And this is where we arrive at the sixth behavior you must no longer endure. The slow erosion of your inner life in exchange for false connection, the kind of bond that feels more like surveillance than support, where your ideas are met with silence, your passions with sarcasm, your growth with threat. They say they love you, and yet every time you expand, they pull away. Every time you shine, they dim the lights. Jung warned us that those who fear their own transformation will unconsciously sabotage yours, not out of malice, but out of terror, because your freedom reminds them of their cage. But the tragedy isn't theirs, it's yours. Because instead of soaring, you start clipping your own wings. You play smaller, speak softer, aim lower. You hide your victories like they're sins. You start to believe that your success is selfish, that your happiness is threatening. And so you contort. You laugh a little less. You stop dreaming aloud. You walk on emotional eggshells in a house that was supposed to feel like home. But let me ask you, what kind of home punishes your aliveness? What kind of love thrives on your silence? The answer is none, because this is not love, it is dependence. It is the unconscious contract of the wounded. I won't outgrow you if you don't abandon me. But this agreement is a prison, and the sentence is your becoming. The seventh behavior is even more subtle, more corrosive, and it often hides behind the softest voices. It is the erosion of your intuition through chronic invalidation. They don't call you crazy, they just question your every instinct. Are you sure? Maybe you're overthinking it. I think you're just tired. And you, exhausted from carrying emotions with nowhere to place them, begin to fold. You start to double-check every truth that rises in your chest. You hesitate, you consult, you outsource your knowing. And little by little, you lose the sacred rhythm of your inner voice. Jung would call this a disintegration of the self, not a moment of madness, but the slow forgetting of your own wholeness. And nothing is more dangerous than a soul that no longer trusts its own compass. The world will applaud you for being agreeable, for being chill, for letting things go. But the soul doesn't celebrate suppression. It protests, sometimes through panic, sometimes through illness, sometimes through numbness that you can't explain. These are not flaws. They are the voice of the self, fighting to be heard. And what has your soul been trying to tell you all these years? Perhaps this, that staying silent has not protected you. It has only prolonged the pain. That your willingness to see the best in others has cost you the ability to see what's actually there. That your loyalty has become a leash. And that behind every betrayal you tolerated, there was a younger version of you silently asking, why do we keep letting them do this to us? And yet here you are, still breathing, still sensing that something is off, that there's a war happening beneath your skin, that there are pieces of you locked in the basement of your own life, waiting, not for someone else to rescue them, but for you to finally say never again. This is the moment when the spiral turns, when you realize that the cost of being accepted is far too high if the price is your soul. Jung never promised comfort, he promised confrontation, and he knew that the only way to heal is to reclaim what you disowned, your fire, your voice, your no, your divine right to not just survive, but to burn with the truth of who you are. These behaviors are not mistakes, they are mirrors, and every time you recognize them, you get closer to yourself. You stop playing the role, you stop begging for scraps, you stop explaining your worth. You begin to remember that love is not pain, that safety is not silence, that you were never meant to carry the weight of someone else's unconscious just to keep the illusion of harmony. You were meant to walk awake, to speak from the core, to draw lines not in sand but in stone. There is a silence that feels like safety, and another that feels like suffocation. The final behavior you must never tolerate is absence in the presence of someone who claims to care, the one who is there, but not with you, whose eyes glaze over when you speak from the soul, whose touch feels like habit, not hunger, whose affection arrives on schedule, not instinct. You don't need to be hit to be hurt. You don't need to be yelled at to be erased, because erasure can happen in the softest way, when someone forgets how to see you, and worse still, when you begin to believe that this kind of emptiness is normal, that your longing is too much, that your need for depth is unreasonable. But the soul doesn't forget what it was designed for, and it was never meant to beg for meaning. You feel it most at night, when the conversations have ended but the ache remains, when you sit next to them and it feels like you're across an ocean, when you celebrate a quiet victory and they nod, distant, distracted, already elsewhere. This isn't neutrality, it's starvation, emotional malnutrition served with a polite smile. And you've grown used to the taste. You've trained yourself to live on crumbs, to find satisfaction in fragments. You say, at least they're here. But presence without resonance is not connection. It's proximity without intimacy. Jung would say you're being asked to play a role you've outgrown, to act out a performance that no longer feeds your essence. And the longer you stay in that theater, the harder it is to hear your real voice beneath the script. And yet you stay. Not because you're weak, but because the cost of leaving feels unbearable, because you've built a life around the idea that this is as good as it gets, because somewhere in your childhood you learned to equate love with endurance, with patience, with swallowing your needs to protect the fragile egos around you. You became the keeper of peace, the one who smiled through storms, the one who stayed awake so others could sleep. But peace built on self-erasure is not peace, it is surrender. A slow spiritual decay, and no matter how skillfully you justify it, your body knows. It stiffens, it flinches, it aches in places that medicine cannot touch. Because the cure is not in pills, and it's in permission. The permission to say, I want more, I deserve more, I was made for more. But let us be honest, leaving isn't always literal. Sometimes the departure is internal. Sometimes the line you draw is within. The moment you stop explaining yourself, the moment you stop seeking validation from those committed to misunderstanding you, the moment you stop watering a desert and expecting it to bloom, that moment is sacred, because in it you reclaim your own mirror. You stop bending your reflection to match someone else's comfort. You stop shrinking your joy to soothe someone else's wounds. You let them feel what they feel, and while you stand in what you know. Jung called this individuation, not a selfish act, but a sacred one. The return of the self to itself, whole, undivided, unapologetic. And as you reclaim these lost parts, your anger, your intuition, your voice, something strange begins to happen. You begin to grieve, not just for the people who failed you, but for the you that vanished while waiting for them to change. You grieve the years spent negotiating your value, the moments you said yes with a shaking no in your chest, the dreams you deferred to avoid disappointing others. This grief is not a mistake. It is medicine. It is the soul's way of honoring the parts of you that were sacrificed on the altar of tolerance. And when you allow yourself to feel it, without apology, something opens, a clarity, a calm, a sense of return. This is where the spiral ends, not with answers, but with awareness. You begin to see that none of this was about blame. It was about remembering. That these 8 behaviors were not random. They were archetypes, echoes, shadows of unhealed stories seeking your attention. And now you see them not as enemies, but as messengers. Warnings sent from the unconscious to wake you up, and now you are awake. Bruised perhaps, but no longer asleep. And the moment you recognize the pattern, truly recognize it, is the moment you are free to break it. Not by force, but by presence. Not with rage, but with remembrance. The self is not found in others. It is remembered in the silence. That follows your final no. The kind of no that isn't loud or dramatic, just clear. Like clean water, like dawn after a storm. A no that makes room for your yes, for your becoming, for your return. You have arrived at the place where echoes live, not in the noise of the world, but in the silence that remains after something real has touched you. There is no applause here, no dramatic closure, only a quiet breath beneath your ribs, a soft shiver of recognition, because something ancient has stirred, and once it opens its eyes, it cannot go back to sleep. You did not simply watch this, you remembered it. You remembered the taste of truth before it was diluted. You remembered how it felt to be whole, even if only for a moment. And in that remembering, something sacred has returned to you. You now carry the weight of names unspoken, moments unhealed, truths half buried beneath politeness and pattern. The behaviors we named were not strangers. They were ghosts wearing familiar faces. And each one asked you a single question. Why did you stay? But that is not a question of blame. It is a doorway. Because within your reasons live your deepest archetypes, your fears of abandonment, your longing to be chosen, your old belief that love must hurt to be real. And yet, beneath all of that, there was a whisper, faint but unbreakable, that said, I was never meant to break in half, just to be held. This is not a lesson to be learned. It is a veil to be lifted. You were not born to be agreeable. You were not born to be consumed. You were born to stand in the center of your own myth, neither villain nor victim, but sovereign, conscious, awake. The unacceptable does not become acceptable simply because you are used to it. Familiarity is not truth. Endurance is not worth. If anything, these are the lies that keep the shadow alive. And what is the shadow, if not the sum of all the truths you've been too afraid to say aloud? You do not need anyone's permission to walk away from what diminishes you. You do not need a grand explosion, a perfect excuse, or even understanding. Sometimes all you need is a moment of clarity so sharp it severs the rope, and in the fall you realize you were always meant to fly. There is no shame in waking up mid-script. There is only power in rewriting the ending. The chapter you begin now will not be written in the language of fear. It will be carved in the alphabet of boundaries, of fierce compassion, of dignified no's and unapologetic yeses. It will sound like your real voice, the one you silenced to keep the peace, the one that was always too loud for the comfort of those who feared their own reflection. And maybe, just maybe, the ache you've carried was never just pain. Maybe it was potential, a raw, untamed hunger for a life that actually feels like yours. Jung believed that the soul does not seek perfection, it seeks integration. And to integrate means to stop abandoning yourself in moments of discomfort. It means to hold the parts of you that once had to hide. To listen to the trembling, to honor the rage, to follow the desire. Not because they are always right, but because they are always real. So if you felt something shift, even slightly, let it. Let the truth expand inside you like breath after drowning. Let the silence that follows this video be the loudest moment of your day. Let it ask you what you've been tolerating. Let it dare you to stop. Let it echo in the spaces where your voice was once too afraid to live. And when the world tries to pull you back, with guilt, with noise, with the comfort of old cages, remember this: the self never forgets. It waits. It waits through decades of pretending, through years of smiling without feeling, through nights of weeping without language. And when you finally say, "I am done," the self doesn't punish you. It rises to meet you, not with fireworks, with presence, with quiet, with the kind of peace that isn't earned, only remembered. This is not the end of a video. This is the beginning of a return to the sacred, to the center, to the parts of you that were never lost, only buried. So if something inside you has stirred, honor it. If a truth emerged, don't look away. And if you feel the urge to share this, not out of impulse but out of meaning, then trust that too. Because this space, this community, is not built on algorithms. It is built on awakening. And if you've seen yourself here, if you felt yourself here, then you already belong. Like, comment, share, subscribe. But do it not because it's what you're supposed to do. Do it because it's what your soul has already chosen. This is Archimind, and you didn't find us by accident. You remembered,